Hi there, I'm Lillian. Welcome to my channel. Here I talk about what it's like to wake up one day and find yourself in a real-life nightmare. You discover you're married to a covert narcissist. I talk about how I was baited through love bombing, trapped by a trauma bond, and stuck in blindness, unable to tell the difference between abuse and love for 34 years. Here, I share my journey of how healing my feminine heart was the key to everything. I started to understand God in a whole new way, and His Word spoke to my heart in a way I didn't know it could. I learned to understand myself better and why I struggled with self-confidence and why predators always seemed to be drawn to me. But the most significant revelation was that my healed feminine heart drove away darkness with light. Today I'm going to talk about love, repentance, and relationship, and the inextricable thread that connects all three of them. I want to start with love, but as with anything having to do with relationship, it's never linear. So although I'm going to start with love, there's going to be some weaving throughout the whole series because my end goal, as with all my content, is to pull your attention to the contrast between a difficult husband that causes dysfunction and a dangerous man who just pretends to be difficult and dopey when it comes to marriage or you. And the reason there's bobbing and weaving in the solution is because there's bobbing and weaving in all the strategies employed by a covert narcissist. And as all warriors know, you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. You have to fight like with like. So, first thing, you don't have to love your husband. Did you know that? Shocking, right? A wife is never told to agape her husband, not the way a husband is told to agape his wife. God intentionally made women and men different, so it makes perfect sense that He would intentionally tell us to relate to each other in those different ways. The question is, why didn't God tell a wife to agape her husband, or her children for that matter? Men are told to love their wives unconditionally. That's what agape means. Wives aren't told to agape their husbands because it's already naturally within us. God is the creator of everything, and just like He created the moon to reflect the sun, or a dog to bark, or a sunflower to turn towards the sun, and a maple tree to release sap in spring, the thing that God wants the creature or creation to do or be is naturally inherent within that creature. When it comes to femininity, our natural fundamental state is to be in relationship. It's wrapped up inside of our estrogen, where all the emotions and feelings are found. Yes, men have estrogen too, but only a fraction of what we have. I'm sorry if sometimes you hear dog activity in the background. Honestly, it takes me so long to record a video because I have a puppy. Well, she's a year now. But, we have two dogs. But whenever I start recording, it seems they think I'm talking to them. So they start playing and activity picks up. And so I do try and edit most of it out. So if some of it gets through, I'm sorry about that. So to continue, relationship is agape for women. Can we do it wrong? Yes, absolutely. That's why there's a clear burden placed on older women to teach younger women how to appropriately relate to your children versus how you relate to your husband. That command to older wives is detrimental to the sisterhood for two reasons. First, and most obvious, is that we aren't born knowing how to relate to each other in 100% perfection of truth and love. If that were the case, God's word would be redundant. Because why would He instruct us on something that was unnecessary? That might seem to contradict what I just said about it being inherent inside of us. It's not contradictory. A woman has all the raw materials for feminine relationship inside of her, but they're waiting to be learned, understood, and cultivated. God knew little girls would need to be taught how to handle our massive payload of estrogen. So he told the older women in 2 places in his word that they were going to have to be examples to future generations. In Titus 2, he tells older women to teach what is good so that they can encourage younger women. And in 1 Peter 3, he tells us to look at the past examples of godly women who put their hope in God. God is clearly setting the burden to be that example on older women within Christendom. We need the help of older feminine women to teach us that. Without the knowledge and example, our femininity remains untaught, unguarded, and unprotected. That's why so many women do not know themselves, and as a result, our relational agape gets bumped, bruised, and broken and misshapen along the way. It needs to be healed. God is the only one who can do that, and that's why we need him. Otherwise, we'll never be able to love appropriately the way he created us to do. The second reason is the depth of brokenheartedness. When that natural ability to relate to others has been dismantled and reconstructed away from God's original design that he meant for us, he tells us to understand and know the way David knew in Psalm 139 that all our days were written down and planned while we were still formless. We simply cannot possess all of ourselves because we're not who God meant us to be. Our real self isn't put together. Healing your feminine heart is part of your regeneration back to who God originally created you to be. When we've existed in, and I say existed on purpose because you can't really live the way God created you to if you're not living according to his design. In truth, your femininity merely sits in a dormant state, existing, hidden inside a woman's body. So when you've existed in an unhealed condition for years, especially if you're a highly sensitive person, it gets more dangerous for you the older you get. Women are already so relational from the start, but if you're an HSP, you will sacrifice your own authenticity for attachment. As females, because we already start out with a high percentage of estrogen, and that makes us extremely adaptable, which is good, and it's part of the design of femininity. But if you're an HSP that's been trapped by a covert narcissist, and I'm guessing you are if you're listening here, it's exponentially easier for you to be taken advantage of. Being trapped by a toxic man proves that your femininity was untrained, unguarded, and untaught. The older women in your life, whoever they were, didn't teach you, nor did they set an example for you, so you could not heal. Earlier, I said that men are commanded to love their wives unconditionally. That's what agape means. And that wives aren't told to agape their husband because it's naturally within us, and it is, for our children. The respect and friendship from a wife towards her husband is reciprocal. You know what I'm saying, right? I'm saying that respect and friendship in a relationship from a woman to a man is conditional. It's not unconditional. And I know that doesn't sound right, does it? The reason it sounds so wrong is because we've been taught to think in masculine terms when it comes to marriage. We've been conditioned to believe that a marriage vow and a one-flesh relationship are the same thing. And that when we have friendship before marriage, it's one thing. But after we get married, that friendship between masculinity and femininity somehow disappears into a covenant and it's now lived out in offices or roles. And that's actually the opposite of what happens. What happens is that the friendship that was developed before marriage now has added weight on it because it has become a one-flesh relationship. Every element or dynamic that goes into a friendship just became more responsibility for masculinity, not less. Marriage adds another whole person for him to be responsible for. Husbands are to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one ever hates his own flesh, but provides and cares for it. Ephesians 5. The reason friendship and respect are conditional for a woman in a romantic relationship is, well, there's two reasons. The first one is that a relationship is the same for everyone, woman to woman, man to man. The difference between a romantic friendship with a man and a woman is the sex component. If a guy met a buddy at the gym and they were working out and a friendship emerged and it was good, but then gradually the buddy stopped showing up and started going to movies instead and not eating healthy, then started to bother the first guy, trying to change the dynamic of their friendship by getting him to not go to the gym anymore and instead do what he wanted him to do, would they still be friends anymore in a healthy reciprocal friendship? No, they wouldn't. So a woman doesn't lose that freedom of choice inside of marriage. She still gets to choose how her friendships play out. A marriage vow doesn't change that by removing her autonomy. And the second reason kind of jumps off of the first one. Without a woman's self-governance within the friendship, she'll burden herself with sacrificial thinking on top of her already inherent adaptability. God created a sacrificial nature inside of both men and women. A man's is found inside of his testosterone, and it's for a woman, Ephesians 5:28. And women carry it within their estrogen, but here's the difference. All that sacrificial love inside of a woman was meant for child rearing, not for a man, not for marriage or the one flesh dynamic. That's why God uses the word philandros for us women instead of the word agape, which he used for men. The broken-hearted lamb, and even more so if she's an HSP, can't tell the difference between love and abuse because she allows the man in her home to sin against her mind, soul, and body. But she's convinced herself that she's forgiving and that she's loving in a sacrificial way, when in reality, she's a people pleaser and she's enabling sin. In an unhealed state, it's impossible, not just hard, but impossible for you to love appropriately. Your love just will not flourish. Being brokenhearted removes your ability to use the feelings and emotions that God created within your heart, along with your thinking capacity to gauge them. And this is when it gets really dangerous for us. And more importantly, because it's dishonoring to God. In Philippians, Paul says that our love must be sincere and intelligent, not sentimental gush. But it gets even worse still when you're brokenhearted. In 1 Corinthians 7:34, God has given us a warning and we completely miss it. He's putting us women kind of on notice here. This verse is tantamount to healing your heart and living in a female body in balanced femininity. God is telling us, pay attention to who your focus is on. But it's gone evilly wrong because of incomplete teaching and ignorance of the differences between testosterone thinking beings and creatures who think in estrogenated terms. This has led us to such unbalanced women who lack the basic understanding of their own female hearts and a complete miss on how to relate to our brothers in Christ, including the one inside our marriage. Sadly, Christendom is filled with older women calling themselves women of faith. And with our Christian culture conditioning, we believe that because they're older in the faith and because they go to church and carry a Bible or lead a women's group, or because they're married to an elder or a pastor, that she can't be a blind guide. Sisters, this isn't true. Jesus demonstrated that there were blind guides all over the place in his time, which I think is the message he's telling us through his scathing indictment about religious leaders in Matthew 23. These words are for us too. They weren't just for the religious leaders in his time, that short 3-year period of his ministry. He's telling us also to pay attention. And he asks us the same question he kept asking his apostles. Don't you get it yet? Why don't you understand? There are just as many blind guides now as there was then, probably more. We've got to skill up our femininity, heal our hearts, and shrewden our thinking. There are just as many wolves, goats, and tares here in our time, crawling all over the interwebs. In Matthew 15, verse 14, Jesus tells us to leave the blind guides alone. He means it. He doesn't say go and prove them wrong. He means leave them alone. How do you leave them alone? First, you have to know who they are. And the only way to know who a blind guide is to be studying the Word of God for yourself, to be in relationship with God through Jesus Christ, with the revelation and teaching of the Holy Spirit. Second, then you can leave them alone, because their yeast will infect all of your thinking and heart. Matthew 15, Luke 12. Their yeast is all of their traditions, teaching, and culture they've created. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. In Mark 8, verse 13 through 21, he makes an important connection for us. He tells us to look out for the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Jesus is connecting the leaven of Herod Antipas with the actions of all the religious leaders that he talked about in Matthew 15. When he wraps up this section about the Pharisees and scribes, he said that, "For from the heart comes evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, sexual immoralities, thefts, false testimonies, and slander." These are the behaviors that you find in the secular world, not unlike today. Churches today, cultural Christianity, has become what synagogues were back then. And that's why Jesus Christ came at the appointed time when he did. The two leavens were identical. And they're identical now in our present time. There's a problem here, sisters. God is your only protection, your only hope for healing your brokenheartedness. God is your only hope to turn naive gullibility into shrewdness. The leaders of cultural Christianity are no different than the Pharisees and scribes of Jesus' day. The lambs are still untaught, unguarded, unfed, and unprotected. John 21. These blind you guides, the older women calling themselves women of faith, have abandoned God's original design of their own femininity, and they're neglecting younger women at every stop. They're not teaching them about their own femininity and how to embody themselves as true female creatures. Instead, they're grooming them to be like men. Through magical thinking, they're trying to get younger women to embrace their masculinity. They tell them that they can do it all, that they can operate just like a man. You just have to fake it until you make it. No one will really know that you only have 10% of the driving power that masculinity has. We can just pretend that we've got 90%. It sounds silly, right? Well, I believed it too. And that's the thinking that pretty much near destroyed me, and how I just about destroyed a few other sisters also. As a broken-hearted, unhealed, unskilled, and untaught wife, I had no business counseling anybody. I believed the lies they told me. I told women that submission was the answer, and when a husband kept crossing your boundaries, keep respecting and keep submitting. Oh, my stars, such ignorance. And that's part of the reason I'm so passionate about my channel and helping you all. God has given me a great opportunity here for kingdom growth, and I know that sounds like I might be thinking I'm paying penance. I'm not. I just have the freedom now to live full out for God. Well, I did have it then too, but not while I was in an unhealed and fearful condition. So I just crossed over into sharing my testimony, and that's not something I wanted to do right now. So let me get back on track. Ignorant sisters, like the blind guides, or even evil ones like wolves, goats, or tares, at the end of the day, what they've done is convince younger wives, and this is how I got baited and captured too. They convince younger wives that if they just sacrifice enough of their authentic selves, all their feminine needs and desires for the sake of attachment, that somehow, some way, their feminine hearts will receive the love that they were created to receive, that someday her husband would eventually follow the command from God to love her like his own body. It doesn't work because the attachment is fake. There's no one actually cleaving to you, so there's no attachment. And this makes any true connection an impossibility because a woman is not being her real authentic self. They've taught lies instead of truth. Authentic self comes first, then attachment. That's why God puts a high premium on the development of character, integrity, and behavior for men. When God said it's not good that man is alone, he changed the man's primary job from providing for and keeping and guarding the garden, tending to nature. He changed it to the nurturing of a woman. A woman wasn't created to lessen the job of a man or make it easier for him to do a function. A woman wasn't taken out of man so that he would have less work to do. Femininity's purpose is to broaden his capacity by increasing weight and responsibility on masculinity. That's why it wasn't good that he was alone. He didn't have enough weight to carry. God made the masculine creature the primary source and resource for femininity. That's why he's got 90% testosterone. It's an ignorant and evil lie to think a woman was created to be the primary resource for the man because he needed help from her pittance of 10% testosterone to help him do his job. God never said that a man couldn't do the job assigned to him, so he needed someone to help him carry the original load of the garden. That's backwards reasoning. A woman wasn't the source for a man's creation. He's the source for her. Masculinity provides for femininity, and femininity receives that provision. Any teaching that leads the weaker vessel, 1 Peter 3 verse 7, the one with the least amount of testosterone, which is the hormonal power behind the ability to work, any teaching that leads a woman to believe that doing any relationship work is her responsibility is demonic. That's what Satan does. He takes God's beautiful design of the polarity between masculinity and femininity for the one flesh relationship, and he twists it until it's unrecognizable and failing. I believe the single best maneuver Satan has accomplished, well, next to the fall of humanity, so the second best strike against God is that within cultural Christianity is to get a woman to believe, well, all women to believe that if they just function better in their roles, that the one flesh relationship will get better. I'll show you why and how that's a lie. An equally yoked marriage has the awesome privilege of making the invisible visible, right? Ephesians 5:31-32. Now, in Christianity, just like in marriage, we've also got two components that make up the whole. In Christianity, true faith, you've got faith and works. Faith is the relationship through Jesus Christ with God. That's the part that's alive and also invisible. The other component is works. This is all the function, all the religious activity that is birthed out of having that living relationship that's invisible. James says, without faith, works are dead. And that tells me you can have religious activity without actually being in relationship with God. All you need to do is fake lots and lots of religious activity. You don't really need to look that far back to see this truth clearly demonstrated. Just think Ravi Zachariah. As a representation, marriage also has two components. A one-flesh relationship, the part that's alive and eternal, and what we call the roles, where we carry out the practical activities to function here on earth in the temporal. A wife isn't supposed to fake a one-flesh relationship through the activities of function in marriage. Just like when there's no faith, a marriage without a one-flesh relationship that's alive is a dead marriage. It is demonic teaching that tells a wife to hide death under functional works so the marriage appears to be alive. This is not real marriage. It's a whitewashed tomb. I did it for almost 34 years. Trust me, I know. If you're married to a wolf in sheep's clothing, that's exactly what your home feels like. Everything is dead. You're just pretending it's not. And you're destroying yourself and all that exciting, beautiful femininity that God created inside of you in that process. A woman needs a healthy man, not an unhealthy one. Toxic men aren't safe for us. They destroy femininity. Toxic men are Satan's best allies against women. When you read the lists in Titus 2, there's definitely some crossover traits between men and women, but there's a different feel from the words that God chose for the men than for the women. And the most striking observation for me is that God never made the same distinction for men. He didn't point out that older men should teach younger men how to love their wives one way and their children another. See, it's obvious for men, where it isn't for us. And that's why older women are commanded to do that, because it's important for females to understand and get control over the two different kinds of power within our bodies. The single attribute that's important for males is self-control. That's why God tells older men to teach younger men directly about self-control in everything, but to train them by example in good works with integrity and dignity. Verses 6 and 7. The highest form of healthy masculinity and the most attractive to femininity is self-control. It's doing the discipline of self-control in the mind, body, and spirit. When a man is self-disciplined, he'll have sensible behavior that's worthy of respect. A man wants respect. He only has one primary love language, and it's respect. Respect feeds his masculine heart. So God tells his sons, reveal your self-control. That's how you'll get respect. And it's from anyone, including other men, but especially from women. When God created his daughters, he intentionally created their femininity to be drawn to and admire and honor that self-control within masculinity. Conversely, there's an off-putting, visceral, ooey, icky fear experience within our body when we experience a vibe from a man that lacks integrity and dignity. She was created to withdraw from behavior that lacks self-control because it makes her afraid. A man who lacks self-control is not safe. A woman cannot embody her femininity if she's afraid. Estrogen cannot thrive in a testosterone-driven body. And when a female is around a male that lacks self-control, that's her biological response. Her body begins releasing high levels of cortisol because she knows it's not safe. But not if she's unhealed. Her mind lies to her heart and tells her it's a feeling of butterflies. Instead of becoming calmer and serene, she feels excitement and intensity. A woman shows self-control in a completely different way. Notice God didn't say for her to be self-controlled in everything, but rather by not sacrificing her authentic self for the attachment to a man that's demonstrating behavior that's not self-controlled. That's not how you philandros a man. That's lying to him. It's not truth in love. When your femininity is still fragmented, you'll fake respect because you think that feeling of excitement and intensity is normal. Almost that you are special because you get to experience this kind of honeymoon phase in your marriage for so many years into it. And that's rather embarrassing to admit to you, by the way. But that's what happened to me. You don't realize that every year that passes, it's becoming more and more dangerous to yourself. And it's the opposite of how God created you to take care of and nurture yourself. And you end up tearing down your own femininity through faking because you're not honoring the warning system that God gave you as a woman. A healthy man doesn't want his wife to respect unrespectable behaviors. A healthy man wants to be called out on his crap. In fact, he depends on you to be a strong Ezer Neged to reflect it back to him. That's a true helper. True masculine men are in utter self-control of every aspect of their lives, or at least that's what they're striving for. They know that's where their power comes from. And that's what God wants his sons to be, masculine men, which is why God created them with 90% testosterone. Masculine men are in complete control of themselves, not other people, not a wife, not children, not pets, the neighbors or employees. When a man is in complete control of himself, his environment doesn't matter because he's ready for anything. And everyone he comes into contact with experiences that within his presence. A toxic man has zero self-control, and that's why he is the opposite of a healthy man. A covert narcissist manipulates and controls everything and everyone in his environment, but he calls it leadership. That's why there's no fidelity. He doesn't want to control his own sexual drive. They're all addicted to porn and having multiple affairs. And I hesitate to mention this because this is something you can't see until it's too late. If he's covert and not grandiose, if he's grandiose, it's much easier to ferret out. It's the same thing with the red flag of manipulation. You don't know you're being manipulated when you're in the middle of it. And with coercive control, you don't understand it as deadly coercive control. You just think he's really stupid or mean or both. And that you didn't catch that in dating, but now it's too late. That's all intentional. And he's not stupid about relationships. They're evilly smart. I remember this one time asking Dean about the money he said he was saving for a house. I wanted to know how much was really in the account. He didn't show me the moment. He just brushed me off with some explanation, and I didn't push. And you know why, right? Because that pushing had already been qualified as a lack of submission and trust. But a week later, there was $10,000 that intentionally landed in the high-interest savings account. Of course, I asked, where did this come from? He said he's splitting up the savings account. into different accounts, and that he had another 10K in a different account, and that it's better for reason, blah, blah, blah. And this is where you slip into word salad. So I thought, okay. Now, the backstory here is that he had already begun the final Hoover and love bomb because this happened 6 months before he left. How I found out about the lying and the manipulation and the money was that my lawyer got me access to our financials, which I hadn't had access to for the last 7 or 8 years. I saw the day that he went and got a loan from a very high interest place. I can't remember the name of it, but I do remember what the amount was for. You guessed it, $10,000. And I sourced it back to the date. And it was the $10,000 that he told me he'd been saving. He had deposited it into our high interest account on that exact day. But I'm not finished with the story yet. The real gift to my destruction of my femininity was that he proceeded to shame me for the next 4 months about how I didn't trust him. My point in that detour is to say that with every situation with a covert narcissist, you do not know until afterward. If you haven't begun to heal, healing is how the Lord wakes you up to it. So it's more beneficial for you if I try and bring your attention to things that are tangible and trackable patterns. Self-control itself is invisible until it's not. You can't see how self-controlled a man is just by looking at him until the lack of self-control begins to manifest, and then it becomes visible. They change jobs a lot. In the moment of present time, as you experience this and you're walking through it, it always seems, valid. There's always a plan that's laid in place before the actual change of the job happens. So it seems to make sense. It's plausible. Each individual instance is imperceptible, but you can see this on his resume. And it's not until all those start and stop dates converge onto a single page that it becomes tangibly visible, and your brain goes, something doesn't seem right. Another demonstration in the lack of self-control is that they have no significant long-term relationships. Any people they do mention from their past, it's always in a disparaging way, some kind of sideways slur or mockery. They also consume a lot of media and food. A healthy mind, body, and spirit don't mean anything to them. You don't see them doing any activities that would contribute to their life, and they're not building. This is important for a wolf claiming to be a sheep, if that's what you're married to. They're not building or contributing to any part of the kingdom within your marriage or home. They only project publicly that they are. But you didn't know that in the beginning. You didn't know exactly what you were looking at because you were being swept off your feet. It's really hard to focus on reality when you're being love-bombed and they're intentionally hiding the truth about themselves behind all that intense love-bombing. And they're pretending that they want to build a future life and contribute to you and with you. The truth he was hiding from you is that he's a false believer. A wolf that has zero control over self, but seeks to control everything and everyone in his environment that's not himself. It's the Titus 2 command for a man, twisted to the opposite form, which is the testosterone-driven desire to dominate others instead of self. And you know who twists up God's word, right? Satan. You need to analyze the manifestations of his behavior, the effect they have on you. It's not about judging and arriving at conclusions, but rather more about asking questions and letting the responses and answers purely fall in the space that's in between the two of you. When you ask a question and observe, without judgment. That's shrewd discernment. I want to ask you, do you know the difference between healthy and unhealthy masculinity? Do you know what a healthy man sounds like and looks like? There's a reason men are supposed to demonstrate their self-control, because that's what attracts a woman. So it should be visible, right? Or at least somehow easily detectable. I used to watch videos of these kinds of men who were in complete control of themselves, but I became afraid to every time I watched, say, someone like Jocko Willink. It exposed the chasm between Dean's words and the way he lived his life. He talked and talked about a healthy lifestyle, but he never lived it. And that sounds bad that I did that. But it wasn't my intention. It was a complete coincidence. And you know, when I say coincidence, I laugh because there are no coincidences, or fate, or luck. This was part of my wake-up journey. When you're a highly sensitive person, that makes all your senses extremely heightened. So I'm always looking for another way to do better, to be better with everything in life. I'm always looking for a fuller or different or faster way or a higher quality. See, the reason is that HSPs don't really feel like they fit in the world, especially in the dog-eat-dog of Western culture, which is fundamentally driven by productivity. HSPs don't orient like that. So mostly what we're looking for, I think, is a way to fit in, a better way to function and handle our overly heightened sensitive natures. So when I was researching about spiritual warfare, I had started with sharks. I think I mentioned that in another video, and that's how I learned how predators think and about their strategies. But of course, I wanted to learn more. So when the research took on more depth, that's how I came across Jocko Willink. And it was my daughter that introduced me to the early lectures from Jordan Peterson. She was listening to him a lot, and I wanted to see what she had been consuming through his media. So I listened to some of his lectures. But when I really became interested in his videos, when he hit the world scene by standing up for free speech. In researching about the science of the brain health and neuroplasticity, that's how I discovered Andrew Huberman. And Dr. Ken Berry was one of the first doctors that taught me about eating the proper human diet, was when I started keto. I talked about that in one of my introduction videos. Clean eating was the first thing the Lord showed me. He began my healing journey with my mental health. I thought it was me who discovered keto, and I discovered it for weight loss, but 4 years later, that's almost laughable to me now. Anyway, these men are all super sexy to me. But that's not why I was watching them. I didn't even make this connection at a conscious level until recently. There was no attraction at all. That's not what it was. Females don't have sex at the forefront of attraction. It's like a kind of delayed reaction for us. We can find a man super attractive and not want to have sex with him. Because it's all about feelings with us, right? So it was after consuming their content, I felt different about me. I felt peaceful, safe, and this one's interesting, capable. Not completely, because I was still living in a psychologically and emotionally war-torn environment. But for a brief time, after I watched any of the content from those men, I felt relief. All the crooked mental and emotional lines seemed to straighten briefly. I experienced a whisper of sereneness. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it felt good. But then Dean would come home, and that sereneness from the straightened lines in my mind and heart would contort backwards. Remember, I'm describing to you a feeling that I couldn't put words to, right? You don't know it in a conscious, lucid way. It's just almost echoes of feelings. I stopped watching them because they exposed huge, gaping deficits within his soul. And the more I learned about these healthy, striving, masculine men by consuming their content, the more huge the gaping holes became in Dean. I didn't know what it was, but I felt guilty and bad somehow, like I was judging him, and those huge gaping holes were getting bigger as I was getting better. That growing chasm I was witnessing was the difference between his words and actions. Stopping was the wrong way to handle it. It was fear-driven. Just like I handled my salvation wrong in the very beginning. I was afraid he would leave. He threatened that he had already left one wife because she became born again. And although he didn't say it that nicely, it was quite aggressive. He slammed open the door and was pounding his fists and waving them at me. I had a 4-year-old. What was I supposed to do? So, fast forward 30 years, and I was still covering the truth of myself by covering all my gifts, skills, and talents. It was impossible for me to see what the Lord really wanted me to see because at every turn I hid whatever was uncomfortable and scary for me. And the thing that he wanted me to see most, and which was my ticket to healing and safety, was understanding my own femininity. That's what happens when you're married to a predator. In order to stay safe, well, you think you're staying safe, you must reduce yourself and become lesser, not bigger, better, and a brighter self. You must live in a dim kind of way within his shadow. But I did start watching them again as part of my healing journey, and that's how I learned something completely different. Men are supposed to live their lives in demonstration of masculinity so that it has this kind of effect on femininity. When you've never had an example of healthy masculinity, you have no idea what it looks like or sounds like or how it behaves. And that's why it was so scary for me. When I was younger, I was unhealed, and when you're unhealed, healthy masculinity is scary to you because it's so different than the familiar experience of toxic masculinity that I had experienced growing up and then married. We think that familiar is right, but it's not. I remembered, or probably a more accurate statement is God reminded me of those men that displayed healthy masculinity, and why I stopped watching them was because of fear. That same fear was when I was first saved and hiding who I really was, because Dean was hiding what he really was. Toxic masculinity keeps broken-hearted females in the state of unhealed. The guilt and badness I felt because I was learning the truth. It was setting me free, but gaining the freedom didn't feel like the experience that I thought it would. At this stage in my journey and life, and probably yours too, watching those men on YouTube was all I had. I didn't get this example from my father or any of the men in my family as my heart and soul were being formed as a little girl. The men were negligent, just like the men I tried to get help from at multiple churches and different denominations. They all sent me back to Dean like it was my fault. A great starting point of healing for your femininity is being in the presence of healthy masculinity. It frees you up. When I say it's all you've got, what I mean is that you can't go backwards to being a little girl. Change your dad and have him father you in the right healthy way so that your femininity can grow in the right direction. The only presence you can experience in alone time is with YouTube content creators. I know it sounds crazy, but like I said, it was all I had. But you know what? It worked. Earlier I said I experienced a contrast when I listened to their content to when Dean walked in the door. those serene straight lines disappeared. But in that serene environment, you'll experience the freedom to sit in your feelings and stay in them. The feelings that healthy masculinity creates for you to be in. Healthy masculinity vibes towards healthy femininity. You'll feel more feminine around it. I know the word vibes is so 60s, but when a man has practiced self-control at an extreme level, which is what these men have had to do to achieve their success and accomplishments on YouTube, you can feel their high level, and it feels safe to a woman, even though I was watching them through a screen. I've also followed other men and women too. I'll put some links in the description box. As broken lambs, we need to witness on some kind of level what a healthy male sounds like and acts like and looks like. It's almost imperative, and the reason is that in order to experience the highest mode of femininity, which is self-care, it has to be done in a serene environment. And that's what's provided from healthy masculinity. You receive this from masculinity because masculinity is the source for femininity. I think the healthiest model is women learning from women and men learning from men, which is what God is defining here in Titus. But I didn't get a healthy introduction to my own womanhood's femininity from my dad. It was neglected and shamed. When I started to develop and look like a woman on the outside, my inner girl was in bad shape. I tell you all that because I want to encourage you to try and understand healthy masculinity, not to be it, obviously, but as a part of your healing journey. You must know what it looks like. And as you observe and understand healthy masculinity, remember it's complete and utter self-control. The more accustomed you'll get to healthy masculinity. And it seems that toxic masculinity will readily expose itself. And you'll be able to have the two felt experiences as part of your reality. You'll be waking up to the truth, and it will begin to set you free. It will hurt, and it will be scary, so be prepared for that. But as you let it happen, things will fall into place and make sense, and you'll feel like you can't handle it, but God will be in it with you. He's healing you and making you stronger. You've been trying to live a godly life of repentance in a relationship of love. But in order for that to happen, there has to be two of you collaborating in creating that one flesh relationship. Waking up is when you understand the truth of why it's never going to happen. You're married to darkness, not light. And God is healing your femininity to drive away the unbeliever. 1 Corinthians 7:15. Closing thoughts. First, shh. Don't say a word about this to him. Discovering that your husband's dangerous is a scary place to end up. It's never where you thought you'd be, and it feels like an unreality. But your silence about your awareness of what he really is, that's your safety zone. And always remember, a clueless guy that causes dysfunction and seems difficult, he's not dangerous. But the malignant man is not clueless. He just pretends to be difficult and dysfunctional so that he can hide how dangerous he is.